Recently, Karl Marx's grave was desecrated. Uh, this has happened before. People have been vandalizing the grave, and I'm sick and tired of the right. And maybe Sargon of Akkad. He's not technically a right winger. He's technically a centrist, but whatever. But people who are kind of on the anti-social justice side, a lot of people on the right, are trying to be like, oh well, I mean the guy's dead, so he's not really hurting anyone anymore, and they're basically rules for thee, not for me type deal, except in reverse. Like we're not gonna stoop to their level. Oh, we shouldn't desecrate the grave of the man who had you know who basically invented, with the help of some others, like Engels, but mainly him, the brain child, the brains behind the whole operation, the man who created the most murderous ideology ever. He created of course, Marxism, which led to communism, and communism and socialism, which are essentially the same thing. Communism is just socialism a step further, Those socioeconomic systems are based on his ideology and have killed more people in world history than all religion combined. And I'm talking over world history, as far back as records go. So over thousands of years of world history, spanning way back to the first days of agriculture, right? Like the Bronze Age, agricultural revolution, all that. Since then, there have been millions and millions of deaths in the names of religion, in the names of empires, right? All kinds of different governments. That all combined is still not as many people dead, not as many people killed in the name of all that as communism in just 150 years. Karl Marx, the ideology of communism came about in the mid-1800s. It was tried circa the early 1900s, socialism, Marxism, and really it's only been a century when you think about it, how long it's actually been used. So even a short amount of time. Within just the last century alone, a minimum of 110 million people have been killed. Someone wrote 66 million on Marx's grave, which is a very low ball figure. Most people just say, 100 million. But generous figures say 110 million. More realistically, it's probably more like 200 million, maybe more. And that's not exaggeration. Oh, you're just a right winger trying to say it's 200. No, it probably is. And the only reason communism exists is because of capitalism. See, there is a downside to capitalism. But that is because Marx's father was a capitalist, and Marx was one of those overprivileged, rich, white liberals. Go figure. And a rich white liberal who ended up working for media companies and stuff, probably not making a lot of money, but living off his parents' fortune. Kind of using the fruits of capitalism, like free press and all those things, using that to promote his ideology. And so you have people on the right. Let's get to that, because this is important. This is what pisses me off. Is people on the right being like, oh well, you shouldn't desecrate his grave as a public site. And I agree that vandalism is against the law. However, you shouldn't have a grave in the first place. And if they vandalize his grave, I mean, yeah, it's against the law, but good. Like, okay, fine, they're breaking the law. I get that, but I don't really care. You know, people break the law every day. There's dumb laws. Okay, you're not supposed to print copies of music from certain books or stuff. I guarantee you, teachers do it all the time. All the time. You're not supposed to print copies out of certain books without permission from the people. Do it. People violate copyright law all the time. People commit fraud all the time in minor forms, of course. You know, they're not actually hurting anyone. Uh, yeah, you break the law every day. There's dumb laws all over the place. There's municipalities that have stupid laws. You know, there's handbrake laws in thousands of cities across the U.S. And I'm sure truckers still use their handbrakes every once in a while. You know, there's dumb laws everywhere you go. You're not going to avoid that. There's not one person in any modern day first world country that hasn't broken at least one law. Even if they didn't know that the law existed, it doesn't matter. We've all broken the law at some point. Now I know that doesn't compare to vandalism, but here's the thing. It's not just a stone in the ground, Sticks, Hex, and Hammer said, oh, it's just a rock in the ground. No, no, no. It's a monument. I've seen pictures of it. It's his head on top of it, and he's looking all stoic. The guy deserves to be thrown in the ocean and sunk. He should have never have gotten that grave. You know where you should bury someone like that? At the bottom of the ocean. Oh well, he didn't actually kill anyone, but it doesn't matter. People like that who are a stain on society, are a stain on the modern world, who you know what we live in a fantasy world, and I was talking about this yesterday. We live in a fantasy world where we think that, oh well, uh, we can't break the law, and we can't do that. No, those are bad things. Dude, people used to do that all the time. We really do live in a fantasy. Like this phone, me talking into it, is nothing. It's a miracle. It's a dream. It could all go away like that. Like this is not what people lived for. Go back 100 years, and you have the real world. You know what they used to do with murderers? They hung them, and then they buried them in a shallow grave in the middle of a field, and they never looked back. They didn't give them respect. They didn't go, oh, the poor souls. No. They did what you should do with people like that. It's like this whole thing of like pedophiles are protected in today's world. It's the best time to be a pedophile right now. It's the best time alive for them. Because they go through trials, or they'll say things like, well, I don't want to hurt kids. I'm just those people used to get killed. They like we live in a fantasy world. You don't even have to go back more than a century. You know? Go back to the Old West, okay? A little over, let's say 1850s. There's things like trials and all this nice stuff, and people have all these extra rights and privileges. Now, I agree that everyone should have rights, but we've gone overboard with some of these things, like the police are like, oh, we got to arrest vigilantes and all this. That didn't used to be the case. Like, people, okay, say you have a wife beater. This is what history used to be. Okay? Say you got a wife beater, right? Woman marries a man, he ends up being abusive, he beats his wife. The family gets together, maybe some of the townspeople get together, and they conspire. It's called a conspiracy. Okay? And one day the guy's out in the field. He goes outside, goes to plow, right? His wife's in the house, she's making the kids supper. And she calls in for supper, and he just doesn't ever come back. Oh, sorry. The guy disappears. Where'd he go? Oh, yeah, he was probably killed and buried in the woods somewhere. That's what used to happen to people. They would just disappear. There's a good song called Straws in the Wind. It's by the Steelwoods. It's kind of like a country rock, southern rock band. They span different genres. You know, they're like country, outlaw country, southern rock, country. Like they you know, they're kind of one of those newer country bands that's not really mainstream. There's a lot of those now. They have a song called Straws in the Wind, and one of the verses is about a guy who comes to town, marries his woman, and he just disappears. And because he's abusive and what, people come around this town and they disappear. People will just get taken out. They just won't ever, no one will ever see him again. And it shows old footage from like 1920s and 1930s movies and stuff, right? It's very true. We live in a world today where we don't do that. And you wonder why Hollywood is filled with sick, disgusting, twisted people. You wonder why the Catholic Church is filled with sick, disgusting, twisted people? It's because they're protected. What we live in right now is a fantasy. Is a world where, oh my gosh, everything is beautiful. This whole thing with Marx's grave being vandalized, really? That is your concern? Your concern is not, the elites in power right now who are desperately vying to keep control because populism is on the rise. Like, you know what will happen, right? These people aren't going to fall out of power gracefully. They're going to mobilize. Ultimately, they are cowards, but they're going to mobilize people to fight on their behalf. And I do see this type of crap kind of ending violently. Benjamin Franklin, he talked about what would happen with our country in the future if, what would happen with our country in the future. Americans would let their country get to the point where it almost got overthrown, and then they would fight back. Or it would almost be destroyed by the powerful. I don't remember the exact quote, but we would fight back, and we would take back our country. Because that's in us, and because our system was set up so that we could do that. And I see that happening. Now, I don't know how soon, but violence is on the way. I don't see a peaceful solution to this crap. And it's sad and it's unfortunate, but it's the real world. I think it's time that we come back into the real world and realize, yeah, there's violence. Yeah, there's horrific things that happen. But there's a reason that we're violent. There's a reason that we fight people. Depression and suicide and all this crap is at an all-time high. Misery is at an all-time high. Well, you can't exactly prove that. Trust me, it is. Misery is at an all-time high. And yet we have more crap than ever. We have lower crime than almost any other time in history. We have all that. We have that combined. It's not one or the other. It's at the same time. I'm talking into a magical device right now. And yet, misery is as high as it's ever been. Suicide is the highest it ever recorded. Drug usage is the highest ever recorded. Why? It's because we live in a fantasy. We don't live in the real world. Yeah, the real world's violent. Yeah, people die. Those things happen. But it gives you a reason to fight. We don't have anything to fight for anymore because there's no reason to fight. That's coming to a close. And it's a blessing in disguise. It's a blessing and a curse. You don't want violence. You don't want death. But at the same time, you want to be free. And one will take precedence over the other. For the longest time, it has been we don't want violence or we don't want death. We don't want bad things to happen. We don't want vandalism. Oh my gosh. That'll be such a minor thing in a few decades. If it even takes that long. Yeah, no one... We don't want those things right now. But it may come to a point where we want freedom more than that. And it looks like it's coming to that point. That's what the Karl Marx's grave being desecrated represents. Again, 66 million is a little bit of a lowball figure, but that's still very high. The fact remains, though, is that... Sorry, my hands are falling asleep. The fact remains, though, is that people aren't doing this because this is a sign of desperate people. You know, the working class in England have been brutalized. And yeah, that's where Karl Marx's grave is in England. They've been treated like garbage for the past few decades. And these are desperate people. These aren't people... They want to be desecrating Karl Marx's grave. Excuse me. If they weren't in the situation they're in. And, you know, normally I would be like, oh, well... Yeah, I don't like Karl Marx, but don't do that to his grave. But the time for that is over. The time for civility is over. Where do you draw the line? You know, Sargon of Akkad. He doesn't really consider himself an elite guy, but he kind of is. You know, I'm sure he makes more money than the average person. And look, it's fine. But he is kind of coming at it from a more sophisticated person standpoint. You know? Because he's not that guy on the docks who lives in a crappy neighborhood, who sees nothing but migrants just flooding in and taking all the jobs on the docks for lower pay because they don't pay taxes and they can afford it. Like, that's not his issue. He's an internet personality. Now, he talks about it a lot, and I'm thankful for Sargon. I'm thankful for people like him. You know, I'm thankful for people like Sticks, Hex, and Hammer. But again, he lives out in the country in Vermont. He doesn't live in a factory town, as far as I know. He doesn't quite see. He lives in that Vermont echo chamber. He, you know, again, probably makes a decent amount of money off the internet and stuff. He's an occultist, so he's already kind of socially awkward, right? Like, he's a little bit outside of the what the average person deals with. Again, I don't know the guy personally. This is my assumption. This is probably accurate from what I know of him. So, yeah, it's not his issue. But it should be. Don't desecrate Karl Marx's grave. Yeah, but you can afford to say that. There's people who are in a situation right now who are legitimately like I'll fight back in whatever way I can. You think people like Tommy Robinson care if Karl Marx's grave is desecrated? You think people who have actually been completely blackballed from society, people like Owen Benjamin, well, not society, but from, say, whatever they used to do. Like Tommy Robinson took a big hit to his income. He's actually suffered. He's actually lost a lot over this. He's went to jail. He actually is the working class. He's from Loudon, right? His whole neighborhood has been overrun by just violence and terror, and it's been horrible for him. O.B. Owen Benjamin. He's from upstate New York. He's seen what it's like. I live in upstate New York. I can attest. It's crapple. It is a crappy place. I love the scenery. I love the weather. I love snow. I love cold weather. I know I'm in the minority on that one. But it has been the economy up here is awful. I look for a job, and where I go to school, there's not a whole lot of jobs up around here because I'm at a rural campus. Look, it's not good. Okay, it's expensive to live in New York. Not upstate New York, not so much, but the taxes are high. It's the highest tax state in the country. He's from Oswego, which is like the pedophile capital of upstate New York. There's a lot of issues here, and people don't want to deal with them. People make excuses. There's a water crisis in the town that I live in, and people don't want to pay literally $20 more for water. By the way, their water bill's already like I think $40, which is nothing. Okay, I've lived in places where your water bill is $100 a month, but there's a lot of issues facing this area. New York is trending more and more blue, even upstate New York, because all the people who are smart, all the good voters are leaving. Right? He left this miserable place, this miserable hellhole, which wasn't so miserable when he left. All right, he went to Hollywood in the 90s, I think. Early 90s or late 80s, whenever. Or no. He was born in 1980. No, yeah, there's no way. Yeah, like 2000s. Okay. Went to Hollywood, made a career, and then he realized Hollywood was just a turd with some, speckles on top. He kind of describes it that way. Goes back to upstate New York. Goes to a nice town up in the Adirondacks, Saratoga Springs. By the way, I know about that town. I've never been. My mother's been, because my mother's from up here. I still haven't been yet. I've been up here a couple of years. I want to go. But one of the wealthiest cities, because it's a tourist city up in the Adirondacks, one of the wealthiest, probably one of the more wealthy places in upstate New York. They ended up getting I think $10 million from the state, and so that's why he got blackballed and ended up moving to Washington. But, excuse me. But, it's very corrupt up here. This is the most corrupt state I've ever been in. The education system is not one of the best. It's a complete lie. Like there's so much wrong with this place. So someone who's actually had to face that in their life. The small towns up here, a lot of them are crappy. They're violent. There's a lot of violence in small towns and a lot of drug usage. Incredible amount of drugs. And it's depressing. You face that, you come out of it thinking you're on top, and then everyone in the Hollywood elite abandons you because you say that kids can't have hormones, right? A 3-year-old kid shouldn't be given estrogen, or a 6-year-old. You see people who've actually had to face this hardship, People like me who've actually dealt with poverty. My family does not make a lot of money. Only now are we coming out of that. I've dealt with these things. I actually know what it's like to be around the working class. I seem like a more I seem like a more sophisticated person because, I like big words and stuff. But I'm not. Where I come from, I should be talking like this and be like, hey y'all, what's up? You want to go get some? Gators? I should, but I don't. But I know the trailer folk. I know the people. I've known the people who do the hunting and the fishing, and I'm friends with those people. I know the small town America people. I know people I've known the hood people. Like I've lived in the inner city, I've lived in the suburbs, and I've lived in the country. And I can tell you, these people have been pushed around and they're tired of it. I know the truckers. My dad's a trucker. I know the nurses at these small town nursing homes. My mom's one of those people. They don't care if Karl Marx's grave gets vandalized. Ooh, boo-hoo. Because they've actually had to deal with hardship. They've actually had to deal with taking losses. So let's stop with this fantasy world where everything is nice and we should treat each other civilly because, that is coming to a close. And civility is not as important as honesty, in the words of Steven Crowder. I'm paraphrasing a bit. There's a point where we gotta say, you know what? Enough is enough. This is coming from someone who's actually had the sort of working class experience. And I am done. I've done my research. I've looked into the media. I've looked into the circus. I've looked into the various conspiracies, which ones I absolutely believe are true and which ones are pretty iffy, right? And the truth is that people like Ben Shapiro, who say nothing is a conspiracy and it's just these people have horrible beliefs, are wrong. And then the other side, everything is conspiracy, like Alex Jones, and Joe Rogan works for the CIA and all that. Well, that's not true either. Although I still kind of like Alex Jones. I mean, come on, Joe Rogan is kind of a douche. But neither one of those are right, and those are all kind of like, I guess what you would call a psyop. They're all distraction. That's all a distraction. The truth of the matter is that yes, there are people who conspire, but generally the evil in this world is caused by people who start out with great intentions and they just move forward and they keep going, and eventually they get to the point where they get a lot of power and they're like, yeah, I did a lot of good, right? And then that power gets threatened and they have to do something evil to protect it. It's never the people like Whoopi Goldberg is an obviously evil person, or Joy Behar. No one's really given her power. Oh, what? She's on a TV show? She's a minion. She works for the people who want to make the world in their image. And watch out for people who say, I've said this before, watch out for people who say, I just want to change the world. I want to make the world a better place. They may in that moment, but they will get to a point where they'll start creating the world in their own image. I don't want to change the world because it's not my place to change the world. I'm not God. I just want to be a good person. That's more important. And if that means vandalizing someone's grave, I'm on board. If that means sometimes you gotta get your hands a little dirty and you gotta be mean. You can't be civil. Then do it. And not I want to support the right ideology. I want to support the right things. I don't want to support uh, these very idealistic, moralistic sort of rules. These ideals. I don't want to support these ridiculous ideals that go above um, actual truth and justice. I'd rather fight. And you should want to fight too. And I know this video ended up being a lot longer than probably was expected, but this connects with such a larger truth. And the truth is that we have to start fighting fire with fire. You have to stop being a wuss. You stop holding ourselves up as the better guys. We're gonna be better. There's no point in that anymore. We don't have time for that. And if you agree, like this video.